You're listening to The Granite Discourse, a New Hampshire-based podcast with real discussions. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And for early access, subscribe to Patreon for just $1 a month. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Calvin Beaulier,
Yes.
welcome to The Granite Discourse.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So you're a state representative.
I am. I'm a state representative. I represent the Grafton 1 district, which is the town of Littleton, and then also the towns of Monroe, Lyman, Lisbon, Sugar Hill, and Bath, all in northern Grafton County.
It's a nice area.
It's a beautiful area.
Have you lived there long?
So I've lived in Littleton since 2018.
Mhm.
So
What brought you up that way? Well, where did you come from?
So where did I come from? So I was born in Texas.
Okay.
Met my wife, who's a New Hampshire native, in college. We were thinking, hey, where do we want to raise a family? And New Hampshire is an amazing place to raise a family. And the North Country in particular, I think is even better. So it's a fantastic place to raise a family. That's really what brought us up there.
How long have you been in the State House so far?
So this is my first term. So I'm a freshman rep. So, it's been my first year. So
Have you been heavy into politics your whole life?
I've been heavy into politics. I don't know about my whole life, but I've always been, I guess, interested in politics. So that's when I was younger, when I went to college, I got my undergrad degree in international studies, and I was really interested in international politics at the time. When I was in high school, when I was in my freshman year of high school is when 9/11 happened. So started to really, really pay a lot of more attention to what's going on in the world. After that point, went to college. I actually studied that because I wanted to be a diplomat. I thought the world needed more diplomats. It needed more peace. I went to college at American University in D.C., saw kind of the dysfunction of Washington, really decided I didn't really want to pursue that, didn't want that to be me and my family's future. But thankfully, I met my wife. So after that, we went to New Hampshire.
What kind of dysfunction would you see in Washington?
This was just during the Bush years. And then immediately after the end of the Bush years, then the economy went to crap, basically. And then we had the beginning of the Obama years. Everybody knows that there's a lot of problems in our society, but there is, especially in Washington, nobody really ever seems to be serious about fixing them. Nobody's ever serious about the debt. Nobody's ever serious about ending the wars. It's just, same old until eventually, they get to retire out or they get some kind of cushy lobbyist gig, and then that's it.
Pretty enraging.
It's incredibly upsetting, and it makes you understand why you saw things like the Tea Party movement. You saw things like Trump get elected in 2016. It really isn't surprising to me, honestly.
You think there's a big issue with things like the Tea Party, like Trump's first administration being co-opted by the establishment?
I guess it depends on what you mean by the establishment, but people, there's a lot of political opportunists, especially in DC. So if they see an opportunity to bandwagon on something, they will definitely do that. I remember at the time, this was me preparing to leave Texas to move to New Hampshire, and I remember Rick Perry parachuting in on some kind of Tea Party event or something like that, and the organizer's like, dude, what are you doing? We didn't invite you here to talk. We invited you here to listen. So, will people try to co-opt it? Yeah, people will try to take whatever, most of them anyway, will try to take whatever opportunity they can.
So fast forward to you moved to New Hampshire in 2018. What made you want to get involved in politics in New Hampshire?
Well, so I moved to New Hampshire in 2015, actually. I moved to Littleton in 2018.
Okay.
What made me want to get involved in politics? It was two things. One, giving back to the community. I thought that, hey, I'm pretty knowledgeable. I thought that I would be very useful to my community representing them in Concord. But the other thing was really my kids. So I have 3 kids. At the time when I moved to New Hampshire, I just had 1 kid. But even then, I was always thinking about what kind of future are they going to inherit? What is our country going to look like? What is the state going to look like? What is the future going to be? And if people who really care about these things don't step up to run for some of these positions, to get involved in their community, we're just basically, leaving it wide open to whoever. And I didn't want to leave it wide open. I wanted to direct it in a way to where they're going to have a better future than I, was born into. And I think that's the way it should go. Each generation, things should be getting better and better. We should be freer and more prosperous after each succeeding generation.
I agree with that 100%. And I feel like that we haven't seen that over the last couple of generations.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the generation thing too much, but, when I was a kid growing up, I remember, hey, the Berlin Wall fell, Russia or the Soviet Union collapsed. They're not going to be our enemies anymore. Hey, the internet's going to create, this new era of, interconnectedness and prosperity.
There was a lot of hope.
There was a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope. And then we see 9/11, and then we see, '08, and then we see some other things. And now there's this really bitter kind of cynicism. And we don't have to go down that path. That doesn't have to be our future. We don't have to choose that.
The debt, I think, is probably one of the biggest issues that we're facing, especially for future generations.
Debt is huge, and then home ownership is huge.
And what do you do for a living?
So I am an attorney. Most of my practice is focused on real estate, and then I am also a real estate broker. So I'm directly involved in the real estate business. So I see it firsthand.
You must have had a lot to say over this past year when they were talking about the housing bills that were coming through.
Oh, yeah. So in the legislature, I serve on the brand new House Housing Committee. So every single bill related to housing gets a hearing in the new House Housing Committee. So, I've heard the testimony, both, for and against, been directly involved, hands-on with a lot of the new bills that, were passed out of the legislature and that were signed by the governor to try to address this housing problem, frankly, that we have.
What are you seeing right now as far as real estate goes? Like, what are you seeing for if a young couple wants to go buy a house? What kind of prices are they paying?
I mean, it entirely depends on where. You could find a community like Berlin, New Hampshire, up in the North Country. You could still potentially pay less than $200,000 for a house. But frankly, where most of the people live in New Hampshire, I think our average sales price statewide, we're over $500,000. I think it's like around $550,000, $540,000 right now for the average home.
And how long have you been in real estate?
So my mom actually made me get my real estate license in Texas when I turned 18, because that's what she does. She's a real estate broker down there.
So you were involved in real estate prior to COVID?
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
What kind of prices? Could you tell me what kind of prices we saw pre-COVID and post-COVID with that?
Yeah, I don't have the exact number memorized. I could definitely look it up for you, but
roughly,
we probably went from around 300s to over $500,000. And if you compare, and COVID had a lot of inflation, so I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, our housing, they've printed a lot of money and they've done this to the money supply," and that's true. Inflation is part of it. But if you compare it to other measures of inflation, if you compare it to consumer price index, if you compare it to just about everything else in our society, the cost of housing has outpaced even those things. It's gotten more expensive faster than anything else. And really, it's a supply and demand issue. There's tons of demand for housing. The supply of housing really hasn't kept up, and most of that, in my opinion, is because of legislation, is because there are actual regulatory barriers to creating additional housing.
And what kind of barriers are those?
So, it really depends. It depends on the exact market and, the exact area. I would say in New Hampshire, we have this patchwork of, different zoning and planning and land use controls. There's some benefits to that because each, community, they get a pretty strong voice on what they want their communities to look like, and issues can be settled and handled at a lower, more local level. But the imbalance that I see is oftentimes you have individual property owners and they want to develop their land. They want to build additional housing. And they've basically created so many rules in such a short period of time to where it's pretty much not economic to build the kind of homes that people want, or frankly, any homes at all. So we've really, if you look at a lot of cities in New Hampshire, easily 90% plus of the existing structures would be illegal to build under the current, zoning and planning regulations. So we've pretty much frozen our communities in a lot of places.
These regulations are relatively new?
So I think it kind of started back in the late 70s, in the 1980s. You really started to see a lot of these new, planning boards created, a lot of these new zoning ordinances. A lot of them were influenced by the environmental movement. A lot of them, they were concerned. I don't know if you ever heard of the population bomb, but this idea that in the late 70s, the earth is headed towards overpopulation. We're going to have too many people. We need to have extreme interventions to prevent population catastrophe. And places like Communist China, for instance, they implemented the one-child policy. They took pretty drastic measures. In the United States, obviously, nothing like that would ever pass muster. But what they did decide to do was say, okay, we need limits to growth. We need to find a way to stop growth. And in certain states, that was more successful than in others. And New Hampshire, I would say, unfortunately, was one of the states that actually did a really good job of stopping growth. And you see the number of housing permits that were approved for, multifamily housing last year, and it's pretty much the same number we had in the early 90s with about double the population. So clearly something is going wrong.
I've never heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's interesting. I know that some of the energy bills, some of the energy regulations have been implemented over the last 15, 20 years or so. But I didn't know that as far as planning boards and all that, that those have been more strict over the last 30 years. That's why we have this issue. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, and it really depends on the town. So some places it's setbacks. Some places is you need this many feet of frontage in order to build a new house. Like, for instance, you need 1,000 feet of frontage. Well, or you need a minimum of 10 acres in order to build one house. The record right now is Lyme, New Hampshire. They have a mountain and forest district. It's about 50% of the zoned land in their town. You need 50 acres to build one house.
That's crazy.
I mean, we had a bill to fix it, and a lot of people got really upset about that bill. That was SB 84.
So what are some regulations that you do think are good as far as zoning goes?
Well, so, New Hampshire actually has some towns with no zoning at all, particularly in the North Country. So, there are communities throughout the country, like, for instance, Houston, Texas, coincidentally where I was born, but it's the largest city with no zoning in the United States. So,
really?
Yes, no zoning. And the way that they've handled things is for certain noxious uses, like, let's say, I don't know, let's say you have an auto body shop that has a paint spray booth. So there's a requirement that if it wasn't grandfathered in, you need 1,000 feet of setback from any residential use.
So you're not contaminating.
You're not contaminating. Yeah, I mean, there's very clearly throughout history, particularly with things like, let's say, tanning or other industrial uses. When I say tanning, I'm talking about leather tanning, a very smelly, nasty process. I mean, throughout history, there's been need to have some kind of way to, moderate that, to control that, to regulate that, if you will. There's a difference between that and saying, yeah, you need 50 acres to build one house, or, hey, in this urban area, you need a 1 acre lot and you're going to need 200 feet of frontage in order to build one house. When frankly, if you look at the existing neighborhood, none of the homes meet that criteria. They were pretty much just, those rules were put in place to pretty much stop any new growth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finding a balance. The other thing, for instance, in Houston, when you have these, communities, because people will say, well, hey, I bought this nice new house and I want my neighborhood to be a certain way. And I think there should be an avenue for people to have and keep their neighborhoods a certain way. I just don't think it necessarily needs to be done, with government regulation. I think you could do that through things like neighborhood associations, like a homeowners association, restrictive covenants, conservation easements. I think those are other tools to where the people who would directly benefit from those things could actually negotiate with their neighbors and put those things into place. We don't necessarily need the government to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you heard a lot of testimony about these zoning bills that went through this year. What are some of the arguments that you've heard against it?
Well, the biggest one is local control.
Yeah.
People say, "Hey, it's gonna violate our local control." I find it maybe not the most convincing argument, just because we've had other bills, like for instance the ban on cell phones in schools. Well, that overrode local control of every single school board in the state, and yet some of the people who are complaining about zoning and taking away local control were very happy to vote in favor of banning cell phones in schools. There was a bill last session, so before I was elected, but last session that protected childcare. If you had, for instance, like a childcare facility, just to have some protections against local planning and zoning trying to shut you down over that. Again, a lot of people were very, very happy to vote for that bill. It's just on this one particular one, they've decided that, they would actually much rather keep things the way they are. And, that's really, I think, not really a choice. And the reason it's not a choice is because keeping things the way they are, by preventing new growth and new development, won't actually keep things the way they are. And you see this in all the places where they've enacted these really, really strict land use controls. Think about Vermont, for instance, with Article 250. Has it really preserved Vermont? Has it made Vermont stay the same over time? No.
What is Article 250?
So Article 250 is a land use scheme that they have in Vermont, to where basically if you want to build anything, they have these local planning boards that get to very, very stringently decide whether or not you're allowed to do that with your own property. So any kind of growth, any kind of development, in addition to all the other hurdles, is going to have this Article 250 stuff. And it's pretty much arrested development in Vermont.
And I think people are kind of worried that with that expansion of housing, it's going to cause their properties to decrease in value.
Well, that's always interesting, because people often complain about property taxes. And if your properties decrease in value, I guess if everybody's property decreases the same amount, your property taxes wouldn't be affected. But if you in particular, your amount went down, then you would have less property taxes. If your amount uniquely went up in comparison with your neighbors, then your property taxes would go up. I don't think it's really the government's job to guarantee that people make a certain amount of profit from any of their investments, good or bad. I just don't really see that as the appropriate role of the government. But for the people who are genuinely concerned and want to preserve that, then again, there is a tool in the toolbox that doesn't require the government to do that. And that is, having these restrictive covenants, having homeowners associations, having these neighborhood associations. There's no reason why you couldn't pay your neighbor to say, I'm going to pay you X number of dollars for this restrictive covenant, so I know for a fact that you're never, ever, ever going to, develop that into a multifamily property or something like that. You can do that. You don't need the government to do that.
Yeah.
But you have to pay for it, and your neighbor has to agree.
Yeah, we have to respect each other's property rights.
Right.
What are some of the changes that have happened over the last year?
So I think there's about 17 bills that passed.
There were 40 total, right?
They're
or around 40.
Yeah, around that. Some of them, they might come back this session. But for the ones that passed, a lot of them, it wasn't just zoning. I don't want to beat up on zoning too much. There was also ones to clear regulatory red tape. Ones to where, for instance, if you wanted to develop, the state had a certain amount of time to, for instance, approve your driveway permit, to try to tear down some of the red tape and regulatory barriers at the state level for getting new development approved. So that was part of it. One of them was, for instance, if you're on a Class 6 road and you wanted to take full responsibility for the road, that you could go ahead and develop that way. The town, would not be able to prevent you based solely on that. So
I know somebody that bought property on the Class 6 road 15 years ago and hasn't been able to do anything with it because they weren't allowed to build on a Class 6 road.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that, you build on a Class 6 road, now all of a sudden the taxpayer has to come in and we have to, develop the road for you and do all this other stuff. The bill very explicitly says, the town's not taking on any of that liability. And by the way, you have to sign a waiver to that effect in order to build. So
it's on you.
It's on you. Exactly.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's good. So how long do you think it'll be before we see any sort of before we see any of these really take effect and start easing the costs on housing?
Yeah. So Unfortunately, the real estate market does not move super quickly. It's going to take a while for additional supply to be created and to come online. So, when exactly will it happen? I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that, basic economics, supply and demand, if we're increasing the supply of housing, then that can only help the market as far as I'm concerned.
It should help the average age of New Hampshire citizens too come down a little bit, I would assume, because young people can't really.
Well, this is one of the things, and nationally and in New Hampshire, the average age of a home buyer is at all-time highs.
Is it 40-something years old?
No, it's over 50 now.
Is it over 50?
So the first-time home buyer is like over 50.
With a 50-year mortgage.
yeah, with a 50-year mortgage. So we're starting. It's long-term not healthy. And one of the other, statistics that I think is also, alarming to me, frankly, is New Hampshire had the lowest number of births in modern history last year.
Really?
Yeah. Lowest in modern history. So, one of my arguments to, my fellow Republicans and conservatives, it says, look, we're the pro-family party. We're the party of family values. If we want more voters that care about family values, if we want to make things better for families, they're going to need a place to live. If young people can't find a place in New Hampshire, they're going to leave. They're going to go to Florida. They're going to go to Texas. They're going to go to these other states, which are run by conservatives, but have a much more pro-development philosophy when it comes to real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at places like Austin, Texas, for instance, I mean, it's grown exponentially, but actual rents have fallen. Can you imagine rents falling in New Hampshire?
No.
It happened in Austin, Texas, and that's with a population increase of over 100,000 people.
Wow.
So, and it's because they fast-tracked condos, they fast-tracked multifamily development.
I did hear some people say that they're worried about some of the developments that could go in to house migrants.
Yeah, no, that's there's a bunch of ways to kind of, chip away at the supply and demand problem. I will tell you, when the government comes in and they, take housing resources away from the citizens and say, okay, well, this was, this housing, we're going to, pay Section 8 vouchers to settle these refugees here or whatever, and no additional housing is created. Yeah, that does impact the housing market for the people that are already here. But if you look at the number of, migrants that were settled in New Hampshire, I did the kind of a back of the envelope calculation on this. It's about 25,000. Mm-hmm. According to I believe it's New Hampshire Association of Realtors, the estimate is we're probably about 250,000 units fewer than we should have. So best case scenario, we could get rid of every single, migrant in New Hampshire. That would be maybe 10% of our housing needs. Mm. And by the way, a lot of these, units, are they necessarily the kind of units that we're going to need in order to, for instance, are they starter homes for families? Most of these units, not exactly. So should our government be giving resources away that, frankly, should, be directed to U.S. citizens first? No, I don't think so. But that's not the silver bullet to take care of our housing problems. I mean, really, the only way out of our housing issue is to build our way out of this housing issue. All the alternatives are basically, that I've heard have been, oh, well, let's just wait until there's another housing crash and the economy's super, super bad. And,
no one has any money to buy a house.
Nobody has any money to buy a house and people aren't having kids or whatever. So waiting for a crash is not a housing policy. Deportations are not going to fix our housing issue either. Really, the only way is to let the free market do what it does to satisfy all of our other needs. The government is there to protect our rights. It's not there to satisfy our needs. So we need to let the free market work, and we need to let the free market build housing.
I think kind of what I was getting at is that there's a lot of fear mongering around these new developments.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And that's what I was saying, is that people are worried that these developments are going to be put in, and that they're going to be filled up with migrants, and that the housing's not going to go to New Hampshire citizens.
What's really funny is so for instance, the New Hampshire Municipal Association has been very opposed to basically every single pro-housing reform bill that's come before the Housing Committee. Again and again, they testified no. And then you ask them, okay, well, what should we do? And really the only policy prescription they have is Concord, or, the legislature should just give towns free money to build housing, usually government housing. So that's their solution.
Yeah.
I haven't really heard any other really compelling solutions. So frankly, I don't think it's going to work. If you look at, and I'm not the expert on migration
Right.
or where refugees are housed,
But
I would imagine a lot of it's Section 8.
Yeah.
You're not required to accept Section 8 in New Hampshire. And frankly, a lot of those single family starter homes that we need built, a lot of those condos, the kind of buyer for something like that, is not going to be a migrant that's got a coupon from the government for free housing.
Yeah. What do you think the minimum size for a starter home is for a young family? What do you think what do people actually need?
I mean, it depends on the family. And the thing is even if, let's say, a 1-bedroom unit gets built, there could have been somebody who was maybe elderly and they were looking to downsize, or their kids moved out. They could move into that 1-bedroom unit.
Good point.
And now, you have a full-size house, maybe a 3-bedroom house freed up that was just occupied by one person before.
Yeah.
So, in terms of what people need, it's not my job as a member of the government to tell people what they need. People need to decide for themselves what they need, and then people should be free to, create what's needed and, sell it through the market.
Mm. In real estate, what do you see what is the highest demand right now for housing that you see?
So it's single family, and it's single family where people can commute to jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I think another big gap we have is for people who don't want to buy or maybe can't buy, but they have families. They're going to need like a 3-bedroom apartment. There is kind of a shortage of multi-families that are big enough to actually house families. So that's a big gap that I think I perceive in the market. But ultimately, what gets built and what's big enough for people, is going to depend on them.
How's the how healthy is the New Hampshire market right now?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by healthy. Is it getting the maximum amount of money for your property that you bought 30 years ago? You could say, oh, yeah, I'm going to make a killing when I sell, Is it, flexibility for people who are coming to New Hampshire, they're relocating here because they have a job or they want to grow their family? I mean, we've done a lot of really great things in New Hampshire to make this a really great place to live, especially for families. But if people want to come here and they want to participate in that and they want to build something in New Hampshire, they're going to struggle. They're going to have a real challenge. I've seen really, really great young families that wanted to relocate to New Hampshire, and ultimately they decided, you know what, we want to, but we just can't afford it. We just cannot afford to move to New Hampshire. And these are people who would start businesses. These are people who, they would strengthen our community. And they're frankly, they're turned away. They decide, you know what, I'm going to go to Texas. I'm going to go to Florida.
I bought this place in 2023, and we were shopping around quite a bit, and it was a bloodbath.
Yeah.
You went to a house and there was 20 cars in the driveway, and if you put in an offer, you were probably outbid. A lot of people like to take cash offers over somebody that has to finance through a bank. It was tough.
Yeah, it's brutal. And I mean, people bidding tens of thousands of dollars above asking price.
I was putting in offers that I couldn't, like, okay, let's see if this works. I didn't even think I could have afforded it.
Yeah. Waiving inspections and, all kinds of stuff. And
I didn't get an inspection on this place. I said, let's just.
So where the market is today, I think that it's still a seller's market. It's not quite as extreme as it was during COVID. And the reason why is not because New Hampshire's really addressed our supply problem. The reason why is interest rates went up. And a lot of people, they are waiting for rates to come back down. And they're frankly, at the higher COVID prices that haven't gone away. Maybe we haven't had, we were having double-digit price increases. We're still kind of ticking up. I don't think it's quite double-digit this year, but it's still an increase. But frankly, people at those post-COVID prices at 7% interest, they just can't afford it. It's just not affordable for them.
So do you think that houses are coming off the market as fast? they're sitting a little longer.
I think they're sitting a little longer. You don't really have that quite the frenzy that we had before. But if you have something that is affordable in that entry, that starter home price bracket, it gets snapped up really fast. I mean, if it's in good condition, it's going incredibly fast.
I remember looking at one house, and there was a bucket underneath the chimney in the attic that was leaking. And I said to my wife, I said, "There's a there's a leak in the roof, so we might have a chance of getting it at a decent price, or maybe not getting outbid. Maybe people won't want it because I could fix something around a chimney. There was black mold in the basement, but it's probably a water issue. There's water damage, so I knew I could fix this. So I'm like, honey, I think we got this one. We got outbid.
Wow.
Yeah. So what are some of the other things in New Hampshire that that you're passionate about that make you want to make a difference in New Hampshire in the State House?
Well, I mean, I know we just talked about housing, but I mean, quite honestly, given my background, I mean, housing is my number one issue.
That's it. Yeah.
That's, when I got elected, the housing committee was brand new. And, I told House leadership, I said, they sent out this, form, or I guess this survey about what committee assignment do you want? And I said, put me on housing. Housing is my number one issue. And it's, I mean, according to polling for voters, it's the number one issue.
Yeah.
So I really think, the Republican Party, we really should be focused on this issue. I think this is an issue that we can win. I think it's a pro-family issue. I think it's a pro-free market issue. I think, the American dream is something that is part of our cultural fabric. I really think we can lead on this issue. So for, some of my fellow Republicans and conservatives that have been hesitant on this issue or concerned about this issue, I would tell them, reach out, because this is an issue that I think we can win on, and we can win it with conservative American values.
You think they're coming around to it?
I think some of them are. I think some of them, there was a lot of noise, and they were kind of, frankly, the NIMBYs and stuff, they can make a lot of noise. They're used to yelling and screaming to create a lot of pressure to get their way. And I think finally we're starting to see in this country, and especially in New Hampshire, that just doesn't work anymore. Yelling and screaming that you don't want your community to ever change is not a policy prescription. You look at the parts of New Hampshire that we all know and love. So like, for instance, I live in Littleton. We have an amazing Main Street. It's awesome. If you haven't been to Littleton, please do yourself a treat and come up to Littleton and visit our Main Street. It's, routinely ranked one of the best small towns in America, and, great community. I think we were just in House Beautiful or something like that as a great place to, raise a family. But the part of Littleton everybody loves was built before Littleton had a zoning ordinance. There are no setbacks. Everything's built, all the way up to the neighboring property.
That's a really good point.
And all the buildings too. The bottom floor is retail.
Yep.
And then above that are apartments.
Yeah.
So again, it's mixed use. So we did pass a bill this year, HB 631, that was signed into the law, to where if you have something zoned for retail, that you are allowed by right to build residential apartments above it. But the fact was, until that bill was in effect, that for a lot of places wasn't legal. So you think about the places everybody likes in New Hampshire, like, for instance, downtown Portsmouth and stuff, none of that's legal to rebuild if it wasn't grandfathered in. And I think that's really, our current generation is really a shame, because our current generation should have an opportunity to build in these communities, to add on in these communities, just the way our forefathers did.
California is dealing with that right now, trying to rebuild after the fires.
Yeah, and what are they doing? They're not.
They're not rebuilding.
I mean, same thing in Maui. They're not. Meanwhile, in Texas, why do you hear about so many businesses relocating? Because it's really, really easy to build. And part of that was because the legislature said, look, you can have your local control about, hey, what kind of fire engine do you want to buy? Or, what do the parking regulations on Elm Street look like? But when it comes to building places for people to live, you gotta let people build. You can say, okay, well, maybe this area or that area, or this is too close to a refinery or whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to allow some place for additional housing to be created.
It seems like the way that it's gone, like you were saying, like less and less people are knowing their neighbors anymore, because people are living further and further away.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, you don't have to know your neighbors. If you want to live, in a rural area in New Hampshire, if you want to live like on 40 wooded acres and be left alone, that's your right. That's your right as an American. But just like that person has the right to choose that. If you want to live in a, apartment or a loft that's above a retail establishment in a walkable downtown, that's your right too. You can also choose that lifestyle and that way of living. We should have the freedom to have both.
The cost to live in a place like that's gone up quite a bit because there are still some apartments that are just like that down the Dover area. And my wife rented one of those apartments for, I think it was $400 a month.
Yeah.
And that was 15 years ago. And I think right now, if she were to go rent that today, it would be $2,000.
Yeah, Dover's changed a lot. A lot of communities in New Hampshire have changed a lot, and that's part of this lack of new supply being created. And for the person that does want to live out in the woods unmolested, if we don't let the urban areas of New Hampshire continue their historic pattern of growth to have new multifamilies built, to increase the density a little bit in places like Manchester and Nashua, that puts development pressure on the rural areas. So that guy with 40 acres, there's only so many places to build houses. If you're going to, freeze development in the urban areas, that's going to put more development pressure on the rural areas. And I really don't think long term that's a lot of these people who are trying to stop housing at any cost. I don't think they really understand the long term implications, because if you have the time and the money and the resources to where, you can spend $1 million, $1.2 million to build a brand new house in one of these bedroom communities that's commutable to the Boston suburbs, you got an army of lawyers. You can pay, $500 a square foot to build. You're going to be able to build. It's all the other, people, the more starter home level, they're really going to have a hard time, and they're going to have issues finding places to live. But it's not going to preserve these rural areas because they're going to have the development pressure, frankly, unless we do actually find places in these urban areas to where they can thicken up a little bit so they can build, for instance, high-rise condos in Manchester.
And the people that are pushing back, are they older people?
So there's definitely been some young people that are concerned about local control, or they're concerned about government overreach. And believe me, it is a healthy instinct to have, being concerned about government overreach. I would roughly say that it is kind of a generational thing. I think most of the opposition does probably skew older. But again, there's people that are older and they're, big proponents of building. So I'm not exactly sure what causes the divide. I don't think it's necessarily, strictly demographics or anything like that. I think it's an ideological thing. And I think it's also, a little bit of a fear. A lot of people, they really are concerned about the way their communities are going to look and what they're going to look like long term, and they're afraid. And one of the things that, the government has done historically very effectively is when somebody's afraid, they say, oh, give me some of your freedom. Give me control. Let me just, you're worried about this, but all you have to do is just, turn all your property rights over to this planning board that decides what gets to be built, and you don't have to be afraid anymore. And long term, what this person's worried about is what their community is going to look like and the changing character of their community. And that planning and zoning board's not necessarily going to be able to protect that. It actually could turn it into something else.
So you're saying that some of the solutions to this problem is for the state to just give money to the towns and cities and build Section 8 housing?
No, I don't think that's the solution to this at all. I can tell you that my opponents...
your opponents believe that.
Some of them.
What do they think that'll make a town look like? Don't you want people to move into your town that can afford to do it, that want to do it, that will contribute to that town more than just take from that town?
I mean, I would think so. I'm not them, so I can't necessarily, speak for them and their points. I think they make this point because, it's usually in response to the criticism of, we have this problem we're trying to address it by, reforming some of this land use control and giving more rights back to property owners, so property owners are free to develop their property. If we're not going to do that, what's your solution?
Exactly.
And they say, our solution, well, we just give the town more grants, and then the towns can decide how to spend the money on housing or, what have you. Or, maybe the towns can reform their own zoning, but it doesn't need to come from Concord or, what have you. I think, honestly, kind of it's a little bit deflection. I think that, maybe for some of these people, they don't care that it's too expensive for a lot of young families to buy housing. They already have a house. They're going to need to sell that house and move somewhere when it's retirement age. So why would they want to mess with that?
Oh, they want to protect their investment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I mean, if you can, if when you were young, there were plenty of ladders and you grabbed a ladder or you bought a ladder and you climbed up, and then you and everyone else you knew, they all pulled the ladders up behind them. And now comes the next wave of people and they want a ladder. Well, guess what? You get to sell your ladder for a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because all the ladders got pulled up behind them. So,
yeah. So you're in your first term.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your experience going to Concord?
What has been my experience? I would say that, I set my expectations really low. They say if you set your expectations low, you'll never be disappointed. So, and I kind of have this cynical sort of view of politics already. So I have to say that I was actually pleasantly surprised. I think, not just in housing, but I think we've notched a couple of good wins this term. We didn't get everything we wanted. There's still a lot more work to do, but I would say it's a little bit of cautious optimism. The other thing that really surprised me was, and I don't know if this is because, maybe my natural disposition and how I wanted to vote just aligned with leadership or whatever. I was really expecting there to be a lot more pressure within the caucus to conform and to vote a certain way. And at least for me anyway, that frankly hasn't happened. I've never been approached by leadership or been threatened or had my arm twisted, say, all the other Republicans are voting for this, you need to vote for this. It hasn't happened. So I've been, I guess, pleasantly surprised by that.
Has there been a lot for you to take in?
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
I need to put a little check mark up to see how many state reps have said that.
It really is, though. You have to learn on your feet, and you have to learn a lot, and you have to learn it really quickly. I mean, they do a little bit. There's like a one-day orientation and all this other stuff, but really, you got to learn on your feet.
Did you make this decision to run on your own?
I did talk to my wife. And this is not the first time I ran for office.
No?
So I've run for office actually 3 times before. I only got elected the 4th time. So
Normally people quit at the 3rd.
That's right. I was thinking, I did this 3 times and I didn't win once.
Same office?
Same office. And I think what it was, really getting known in the community. So I also serve as the vice chairman of the Littleton Planning Board myself. And I think it was, because I didn't grow up in Littleton, I was just saying, well, I didn't grow up here, but I got here as fast as I could.
Carpetbagger.
But I think it really was, letting people get to know who I am and understand that, I'm here to represent the community. I'm here to help the community. And even in the North Country, cost of housing is a major, major, major concern.
Well, like you were saying earlier about a house in Berlin you can get one for maybe under $200,000. I've seen some of the houses that you can get for under $200,000. There's no place I'd want to have my family and not without $100,000 worth of demo.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those homes are in really rough shape, they're on postage stamp lots because a lot of that housing was built back when Berlin was a mill town, and it was worker housing for people who lived in the mills, frankly.
And now what is there? There's not a lot of work in that area.
There's not a lot of work in that area, so again, supply and demand, and but there's been a lot of great people that have moved to that area. Littleton back, they always say we're standing on the shoulders of giants. There recently was an attorney who lived in Littleton. His name was Brian Ward. He was a select board member. He was a state rep. He created the Littleton Economic Development Task Force. Back in the 70s, there was real economic challenges in New Hampshire. And what was decided, at least in Littleton, was, all these other towns, when they were losing their mills, they were just trying to hit the pause button. They were just trying to make everything stop, nothing change. In Littleton, the decision was made, let's set up an industrial park. And let's set up let's set up an economic task force. Let's beautify Main Street. Let's try to find a way to, redevelop some of these, mill properties and stuff like that. Let's find a way to bring tourists into the area. And I'll give you a great example of this. It's not just that. I mean, they were looking at all kinds of economic development. So Littleton has a Walmart.
Yeah.
Littleton was not Walmart's first choice. Walmart actually, from as I understand the story, initially wanted to go to St. Johnsbury, Vermont. And St. Johnsbury's, at the time, it was, oh my God, Walmart's going to come in. It's a big box store. It's going to destroy Main Street. It's going to kill all the small businesses. And, in Littleton, the idea was, no, we want to grow. We want to develop. And it doesn't, okay, Walmart, do you want to come in and build in Littleton? Fine. And they did. So we have one of the best main streets in America. And we went out of our way to get a Walmart.
And the Walmart's not right on Main Street.
It's not right on Main Street. It's over in a separate area. It's on Meadow Street with all the other big box stores. We got a Lowe's, we got a Home Depot, we got a Staples. But it just goes to show you that Walmarts don't kill main streets.
No, because I drive through Littleton fairly often, and it is a nice little town.
So it goes to show that there's room for everybody. Everybody can have, a piece of the economic pie.
There's real demonization of corporate America.
Yeah.
And some of it is, rightfully so. But
yeah, some of it's justified.
Very much. But at the same time, it's not bad for the economy to have options.
No, it's all about choice. I mean, if you don't like what Walmart's selling, then you don't have to buy from Walmart. And I mean, nowadays you can order online. So if I don't like what they got at Walmart, I can order online from Amazon. Or if it's something to where I want a certain level of quality, or I want, so Littleton also has a food cooperative. So if I want local, I don't want to buy, maybe, something made by ConAgra Foods that's, just full of preservatives and it's stuck on the shelf in Walmart. I can go to the Littleton Food Co-op and I can get something, from a local farm less than 50 miles away. Both of those options exist because that's what this country is about. This country is about freedom. It's about the ability to make your own choices. When the government puts their thumb on the scale and tries to say, look, you can only make these types of choices, that's really where we start to get a lot of the problems our society is dealing with.
How long were you on the planning board for?
So I've been on when did I join the planning board?
Are you still on the planning board?
Yeah, I'm still on the planning board. I was recently made vice chairman. I've probably been on the planning board for almost as long as I've been in Littleton. So yeah, that must have been 2018, 2019, somewhere around there.
And what are some of the things that you've seen and done on the planning board in Littleton?
So a lot of what we do is lot line adjustments and subdivision requests. We don't actually handle the zoning variances. That's all handled by a zoning board. What we do, though, is we do have input on what the zoning ordinance looks like. Mm-hmm. So when it comes time to tweak the zoning ordinance or change the zoning ordinance, that originates with the planning board. We're actually in a process right now to, take a look at Littleton zoning ordinance and maybe see it's been updated piecemeal, but is there a way to where we can actually change it to make it actually easier to build and develop in Littleton? And one of the ideas is something which some other New Hampshire towns have been doing recently, which is called cottage court developments.
What's that?
So cottage court is where you have a piece of land, usually in an urbanish area, usually with access to public water, public sewer, and you build these cottages, usually somewhere from 900 to 1,200 square feet, and you kind of put them all together in like a little bitty cluster. So you'll have maybe, 6 cottages or 8 cottages or something like that, and they're on one of these lots, and then they have like a courtyard in the middle, and then they'll have parking, maybe not necessarily next to each, cottage. Maybe they're kind of around the periphery or what have you. But it's a bunch of little cottages basically sharing one lot.
Are they all 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom?
It depends. 1,200 square feet, you could theoretically get 3 bedrooms. I think in that amount of space, you're definitely going to get 2 bedrooms.
Nice. So have you seen a lot of growth in Littleton since you've been there?
So yeah, actually we had the Hitchner property. So that was an abandoned mill. There was a guy who was a developer from the seacoast, came up, bought the site. It was a brownfield site and has completely renovated it and redeveloped it. It's mixed use. It's got apartments. It's got, actually really, really nice coffee shop called the Inkwell. It's got indoor golf. It's, So that's something that was actually really nice to see, is take something that was abandoned, derelict, and restore it and provide value to the community. There's been some duplexes and condos that have been built. There's been some single family that's been built. Main Street is still pretty healthy. But I mean, things could always be better. You know what I mean?
I drive all through a lot of towns in New Hampshire, and when you go through like the North Country, you see a lot of towns that just they're not as vibrant as they were.
Yeah.
And then you hit Littleton, and it's fairly impressive, I would say.
I think that's like I was alluding to, about a generation ago, there was a group of people that said, we want this community to grow. They made the conscious decision that we wanted this to be the town that said yes to doing stuff. And they did. And that's starting to inspire other communities in the North Country. So, I mean, I'm optimistic long-term about the future of Berlin. I mean, it's in a gorgeous area. There's been a lot of young families that have moved there because of the cost of housing, and they're starting to, reinvigorate that. And, we've seen that. There's recently a special election there. It flipped, on the last term, actually this current term, but in 2024, it flipped to a solid red district. And now we had the special election, and we maintained it being a Republican-held seat. So it just goes to show you, in the margin of victory, they did some recounts and stuff, but I think it's about 5 seats. I can think of 5 young conservative families that moved to Berlin for cost of housing, and I'm pretty sure those families vote, and that very well could have made the difference. And not just in Littleton, but even smaller towns. So also in my district is Lisbon, New Hampshire. Lisbon, New Hampshire, I mean, it's had its, challenges as well. It's smaller than Littleton. It's got a brand new coffee shop on Main Street. The Main Street, commercial businesses have been redone. They look very, very nice. There's some apartments that have been, completely redone also on Main Street, look very, very nice. So it's gotten fixed up. And then one of the largest employers in the area, New England Wire, I mean, they make, precision wire for all over the world, including defense applications, some biomedical. I mean, if you have a pacemaker and it needs a little wire, somebody's got to make it. Well, it's made right in the North Country in New Hampshire. They've actually expanded, so they're going to offer even more, products and stuff like that. And that employs hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So it's continuing to grow.
I know that. Do you ever try to put yourself in the mindset of somebody that is against growth?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, so I try to represent my community and be an effective advocate, and I try in the legislature to fight for what I think's right. And part of that skill set, I think, is being able to understand where the opposition is coming from, understanding what is the nature of the problem, and can we find a way, to work forward towards something. So I think there's a lot of different reasons why somebody would be opposed to growth. And if it's something to where they really fear what the neighborhood's going to look like, I think that those people need to be reassured. And then they also need to be taught about some of the tools that are available. Like I said, deed restrictions, conservation easements, homeowners associations, to say, look, if you want to make sure your neighborhood always looks the same and people, aren't going to do anything, outside of what you've already bought into, then yeah, that should be an option available to you. I think for some people who are degrowth, I think there are some people on the extreme left in the environmental movement that are very much about degrowth. They don't think that our planet can sustain as many people as we have. And they are very, very happy to be anti-natalists. They are very happy to do whatever they can to try to limit growth and to halt growth.
And you said that that's a growth, that anti-growth movement started back in the 70s?
So it definitely got a huge shot in the arm in the 70s. I think it's kind of a version of, this whole Malthusian, catastrophe. Malthus was an economist who said, very quickly population growth is going to exceed the amount of food we can grow. So we're going to all starve to death. He was warning about that, I believe, in the early 1800s. And it seems like that idea just does not go away. People, they just don't believe that we can grow our way out of problems. So I think every generation you have this idea of There's not enough to go around. The pie is never, ever going to get any bigger. So we need to actually start, drawing lots and figure out, who we're going to get rid of. I frankly just don't accept that. I think the course of human history has shown, and again and again and again, when we're faced with challenges, we can be smart and we can discover new ways of solving our problems, including feeding people. So,
so is this something that you've studied into quite a bit?
I'm not an economist, so I've definitely studied economic theory. As part of my undergraduate education, very interested in economics because a lot of that dovetails with foreign policy, and some of the also just politics in general is, I think, very closely related to economics. But I'm not an economist. This is just something that I've read and studied. And
is there any kind of philosophy that you follow?
Any kind of philosophy that I follow? I think it depends on what area of my life we're talking about. I would say when it comes to politics, my philosophy is very much the thing that really, I think, inspired me to run as a Republican was really Ron Paul. I remember the Ron Paul campaign in 2008, then 2012 again. And
that's the other thing. I need another.
Another. Ron Paul was right. Yeah, another nickel in the Ron Paul was right jar. Yeah. But yeah, I would say that's probably my political philosophy. The role of government is to protect our individual rights. That's what the government should be doing. It should be protecting our property rights. It should be protecting our freedom of speech. It should be protecting our Second Amendment rights. All of that stuff. So when it comes to legislation, that's really my philosophy is, does this give more control to the government or does this give more control to individuals? And I try to come down on the side of giving more control to the individuals as much as I can.
Where were you before Ron Paul?
Where was I before Ron Paul? I mean, I don't know. I was pretty young. So let's see. I graduated high school in 2004, and then I graduated college in 2008. And I did go to law school after that. So I took a little bit longer in law school. Graduated in 2014 for that.
You said that you were in Washington for that, right?
So I was in Washington for my undergrad. For my law school career, I was actually in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I went to Louisiana State University.
What was that like?
Man, people like to drink in Louisiana. Oh man, add a bunch of LSU and law students on top of it, and oof, yeah, I don't think my liver can handle that. Then they got drive-through liquor stores there.
Do they really?
Oh yeah, drive-through liquor stores, drive-through daiquiri shops. So as long as you get a daiquiri or a margarita or whatever, pina colada, and it comes in a styrofoam cup with a little plastic lid, and as long as you keep a little piece of tape over the top of it, that's a sealed container, so you can drive around with that.
That's like
you can't drink that, but you can have it in your car.
They had those rules during COVID in Maine.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, quite a few places they did ease up on the alcohol rules, and you could get delivery cocktails and other stuff. They really
they wanted people drunk so they wouldn't be so pissed about the lockdowns.
It just goes to show when you have a crisis, all of a sudden a lot of things that were not politically viable before, all of a sudden they now become possible.
Isn't that weird?
That's not weird. That's human nature. But it's when we need to be the most vigilant. And a lot of people, I'm very happy to say, in New Hampshire, a lot of people were extremely vigilant about our liberties during COVID. They saw the threat to our freedom, and they were very loud about it. And that's exactly what we need to be. But we also need to be that way even when it's not, such an obvious, emergency, or when such an obvious threat. A lot of our threats to liberties are very, very, very subtle. Somebody described it as the ratchet effect. Every bit, just a little bit, tighten up the ratchet, a little more regulation, a little more taxes, a little more red tape, and you let this run for 100 years or more, and you get, basically a society where, you can't do anything hardly without running into major, major, major obstacles. So what I like about New Hampshire is they never really were able to spin the ratchet as far as they were in other states. And actually in this state, it's my perception, especially with our current legislature, that we've actually flipped the ratchet, and we're actually starting to unwind things, and we're actually starting to undo that decades of damage to our liberties and to our prosperity. And I think repealing car inspections is a great example of that.
Banning mask mandates too.
Banning mask mandates, constitutional carry.
Yep.
We're starting to unwind a lot of this stuff, and we need to build on that momentum. We can't slow down. We can't say, oh yeah, New Hampshire's going to be free and prosperous. We need to say, every single generation, it's a republic if you can keep it. We need to fight every single generation for this liberty and protect it and pass it on. That's our job.
Yeah, and I've said this before, but it's good to see that there are a lot of Republicans moving to New Hampshire.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the other thing too. A lot of people, if we build additional housing in New Hampshire, based on current migration patterns, the kind of people who are most likely to move into that housing are probably going to be people, who want low taxes. They want live free or die. They want to, start a business. I think we need to continue to encourage that. We need to give a space, for people like that. And the other thing too is, some of this stuff like, for instance, banning surgery on trans minors. There were a lot of, liberal activists who said, I can't believe it. This is the last straw. I'm going to leave New Hampshire over this, And wouldn't that be an amazing thing if we made New Hampshire so free and prosperous that the people who didn't want to live that way, they would leave, and the people who did want to live that way would move here? I think that would be great. I think that would be a win-win.
How big of a decision do you think it is? How big of an influence is it on the decision to move to a different state when it comes to state laws?
It depends on the person. I mean, some people they don't pay a lot of attention to politics.
Yeah.
Some people don't even pay that much attention to state laws until they get caught. So it really depends on the individual. But if you're looking to start a business, you're usually somebody who has the ability to plan, and you're somebody who is looking for a solid foundation. So I think those types of people probably would look at things like taxes. They would look at things like state regulation, and they would choose accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're living in New Hampshire, you look all around. You look at the states all around us, and they're not really appealing to me, anyways.
Yeah, I told my wife, I said, okay, if we're going to raise a family, I'm either going to raise my kids in New Hampshire or I'm going to raise them in Texas, and that's pretty much my only choice. Those are my only choices. But it's funny, when I go visit my parents in Texas, there's things about Texas that really annoy me now, having lived in New Hampshire.
Like what?
Sales tax.
Oh.
So, Texas, they got a sales tax. It's like 8 point whatever %. And it's on everything. So, let's say you want to go, buy some ammo or something. Oh, well, enjoy your 8%, sales tax on your ammunition. The other thing, too, is Texas has a reputation of being a very Second Amendment-friendly state. It is a Second Amendment-friendly state. However, the way that they did it is there's what they call these 30-06 and 30-07 signs, which if you are a property owner and you don't want somebody to carry on your property, whether open or concealed, you can put up a 30-06 sign to make it a gun-free zone for concealed carry, and a 30-07 sign to make it a gun-free zone for open carry. And a lot of, you talk about corporate America, there's a lot of corporations who's, because of their, they got a board of directors that's woke or a super risk-adverse attorney, and they're saying, oh, yeah, put these signs up. So you see them everywhere in Texas.
Really?
All these, you can't bring a gun in here. Don't bring a gun in here. It's a crime.
Wow.
You don't see that in New Hampshire.
No.
So stuff like that. You go to Texas and you're like, it's good, but it's no New Hampshire.
No.
We also got fire ants down there.
Oh, really?
And venomous snakes and, other things. My wife, she was born in Concord, and I could never convince her to move to Texas. No way. No.
Obviously she's been there. She's not a fan.
It's so hot and humid, and nothing's walkable either. That's the other thing too. She likes to walk, and Littleton's very walkable. So that was one of the things that's nice about, when we bought our house. I live kind of in the, a couple blocks away from Main Street, kind of up on a hill. And if she wants to walk to the park with the kids, she can. If my son wants to walk down to the library, he can go do that. If we want to go walk to the world's longest candy counter, we can do that.
That's in Littleton?
That's all in Littleton, all within walking distance of my house. My wife can, she can walk down to go to Mass. We got a Catholic church, like 2 blocks from our house. So it's all walkable.
And how's Texas not walkable? It's just everything so far away?
So most of the growth in Texas happened when automobiles were already a thing. So Houston only had 100,000 people when they invented air conditioning in like the 1930s. and it's got, millions of people today. So everything is all spread out. There's no sidewalks. There's no, even if there are sidewalks, nobody uses them. Everything's just all spread out. You got to drive everywhere. The greater Houston area is larger than the entire state of Connecticut. And almost none of it is walkable. And even if you could go and walk, it's like, half the year, it's like 95 degrees with 95% humidity. You don't want to go out and walk in that.
So back to the State House.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite thing about being a state representative?
My favorite thing about being a state representative, well, it's not the $100 a year. Definitely not that. I really, honestly, my favorite thing was when I did get elected. It's kind of this sense of this feeling of honor that you get because your community chose you to represent them. And that's a really, really, it's an awesome feeling to say like, yeah, wow, people in my community, they, enough of, a majority of them decided that they trust me to do this and they want me to represent them. That's a very humbling feeling. But it's also like, man, you really don't want to screw it up.
How did your election go?
I think it went pretty well. It could always be better. So definitely some ideas for campaigning next time. But I think for me, not having grown up in the area, it's really just getting out there and meeting people and, introducing myself and telling them, hey, this is who I am and this is what, I believe in. And if you agree with me, then I would really appreciate your vote so I can go to Concord and represent you so we can continue to keep all the things about New Hampshire that are awesome. We can preserve those things and then we can make some other things even better.
Well, the midterms coming up. And for somebody because this is your fourth time running, so I'm sure you've learned something every time.
Yeah.
For somebody that's thinking about running, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them? Any strategies that you would say you should use? Do you put money into signage? Do you put money into mailers? Any sort of outreach? Anything like that?
Well, the first thing is you got to decide if you want to run, because it does take time. You are going to have to, go down to the State House, sometimes several times a week for half the year.
How often do you go down?
So for me, yeah, it's probably about twice a week, about half the year, depending on your committee assignment. I mean, some committees are way busier than other committees. But for the Housing Committee, the way it worked out is about once a week for committee and about once a week for general session.
Okay.
So
somebody that makes that decision that they want to run, what advice would you give them?
Well, so make sure that time commitment's right for you. Because there's been, even though we have a Republican majority in the legislature, there's been several times where we've had critical legislation pass or fail by one vote. That's happened. So if you really want to be a representative, then you got to understand that there's a time commitment. And if you're not there in session, then for that vote, your community didn't have a voice. So I think just understanding, that, hey, this is going to be a time commitment. You're going to get paid $100 a year plus mileage. You're going to, have a lot of, emails that you got and phone calls and text messages to follow up on. But if that's something that you feel like you can do, then I think the next step is it depends on the district. So I would definitely get in touch with your local GOP committee. I would also get in touch with, there's some organizations that are interested in recruiting and training Republicans to run for office, conservatives to run for office. So getting in touch with some of them. They have some candidate training. It's pretty good, honestly. And then understanding, from there, that I think the candidate training will be pretty eye-opening, in terms of, how to spend your time and resources. Because the resources aren't just money, it's also time, so when you're campaigning, figuring out where to do that, door knocking, maybe not the world's funnest thing to do, but still can be pretty effective. I know a lot of people, they really, really appreciate their privacy and stuff, but it is probably one of the most effective ways to get people to come out and vote is, knock on their door and tell them, hey, there's going to be an election and I'm going to be on the ballot and this is what I'm about. I would really appreciate your vote if this is, if you agree. So, going out there and asking for the vote, just don't assume that people are going to know who you are just because you put your name on the ballot or because you put something online or you wrote a letter into the newspaper. There's no, people aren't obligated to know who you are.
Yeah.
It's part of your job to help them understand who you are and what you're going to do.
Political signs don't win elections.
No, yeah, signs don't vote. Signs do not vote.
With your time in Concord, what has been your least favorite thing to deal with?
My least favorite thing to deal with. The parking garage that they make me park in is pretty sketchy. I'm not going to lie. They're building a new one. So that'll be nice. I will definitely say the taxpayer, I'm definitely a fiscal hawk, and the taxpayer definitely got their money's worth out of the Store Street garage. So it's definitely time to retire that one. Least favorite thing, there is definitely I think our politics are pretty toxic in this country right now.
Oh yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who might be okay people, when you talk to them, in passing in public, or you talk to them at a ball game or something like that. You talk about politics though, and some people just get totally unglued.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably my least favorite thing is, there are some people, they're straight up deranged. There's some people on the left that I get I'm not going to say necessarily that I get along with them and that I agree with them, but I get along with them in so much in that, okay, I can be in the same room with them. There are some people on the left though, where I genuinely am concerned about, are they going to resort to violence? Are they going to, the kind of people who cheered when Charlie Kirk was murdered? That's pretty frightening. And there's people in my community that they're totally happy with that. They're glad that happened. And that's really scary. That's really scary to have as part of our, political discourse. Mm. So that's probably my least favorite thing is just the toxic nature of politics, and then there's been some people on the right that, they, for whatever reason, they're so used to politicians lying and politicians being crooked that they could never, ever imagine that maybe the simplest answer is the most obvious one. Maybe the correct answer is the most simple one. But instead they're like, oh no, it's a George Soros, WEF, conspiracy, they got the Illuminati meeting or whatever. I'm not a big fan of that, but you run into it.
Oh, absolutely. You see it everywhere. I think that there was definitely something to COVID and the World Economic Forum coming out. And
yeah, those are bad. Those are bad people. Don't get me wrong. There are bad people that want to take your freedom away, and they are plotting to do it. And it is perfectly healthy to be skeptical of, your government. You don't have to like your elected officials. It's your constitutional right to hate your elected officials and criticize them and all this other stuff. But I worry about, effectiveness. If those people out there doing that, if you're out there, tilting at windmills and going after conspiracies that frankly don't exist, then you're just taking time and resources away. You're taking the spotlight away from the actual things that they are doing to harm you and to harm our freedom. So, it's yes, take things with a grain of salt. But I think we all probably know people that go maybe a little too far into the conspiracy theories.
Yeah. What do you think the craziest conspiracy theory is?
The craziest conspiracy theory. My favorite movie is probably Doctor Strangelove. Oh, you got to watch it. It's a Stanley Kubrick movie. It's about the this goes to show that I'm a foreign policy nerd. So it's set in the Cold War. Came out 1964. So think about Cuban Missile Crisis was very, very recent, and it's this thing where there's this Air Force general that kind of goes nuts, and he's convinced that fluoridation of water is a communist conspiracy to sap and impurify our precious bodily fluids. So to stop the communist conspiracy of fluoridation of water, he orders the strategic bombers under his command to go drop all of their hydrogen bombs on Russia. Oh. And the Russians have secretly developed a doomsday device, which anytime Russia gets bombed will detonate and will end all life on Earth. So most of the movie is set in the war room in the Pentagon, and it's about the president and all the generals and the Joint Chiefs, and they're all trying to figure out what to do and how to stop this thing. And it's really a farce on foreign policy and politicians and, mutually assured destruction and all of that. So it's really, really, and it's Kubrick, of course. So it's brilliantly directed, very, very funny, darkly funny, and entertaining. But my favorite conspiracy because of that is always the fluoridation of water. Which, by the way, for the record, I am against fluoridation of water. I do not think that the government should put fluoride in the water. If you want fluoride, you can go take your own fluoride. You can brush your teeth with fluoride. I use fluoride toothpaste. We don't need the government to put it in the water for us.
Yeah. I don't think that every politician you disagree with is a globalist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we should be working together to preserve New Hampshire for what it is. It is the freest state in New England. We need to keep it that way.
I would argue it's the freest state in the country. And I would argue this is the freest country in the world. So we are the freest state in the freest country in the world. And if we're not in some way, then we need to change things so we are.
Yeah.
That is what New Hampshire should be now and forever.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't want to live in any of our surrounding states, that's for sure.
No, not at all. I think they're a great, if you think the way, they're doing things, in some progressive.
Move there.
Yeah, go there. Vote with your feet.
Yeah.
But New Hampshire, the state motto is live free or die. It should mean something.
Didn't somebody want to change that a couple of years ago?
Oh, yeah. They want to change that. They want to add an income tax. They want to add a sales tax. They want to add a gun ban. They want this to be, Massachusetts Junior is what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Say don't mass up New Hampshire. There you go. By the way, for all the people who say don't mass up New Hampshire as a response to, the zoning stuff, I will note that the Massachusetts Constitution protects local control as part of their Constitution. There is no such protection in the New Hampshire Constitution. I will go further and say that Massachusetts towns, the average is, I think, about 120-something pages of zoning regulations for the average town in Massachusetts. It leads the country probably in regulation, but definitely in land use control regulation. So you want to talk about massing up New Hampshire, then unchecked local control coupled with hundreds of pages of zoning regulations, that's massing up New Hampshire.
That's how we get a lot of Massachusetts people, too.
Yeah, they feel it's like, oh, it's just like home. I'm so comfortable. If you're from Massachusetts, and so my son was born in Massachusetts, actually.
I was born in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Massachusetts. Yeah, a lot of great people are born in Massachusetts. That's where the American Revolution started. Mm-hmm. There's a great history in Massachusetts. It's the liberal government completely subverts it, and tries to run that state into the ground. But for the people who are from Massachusetts and really do believe in freedom, if you're going to come to New Hampshire and you're going to build New Hampshire and support New Hampshire, I say more power to you. I mean, it's an incredible thing. I'll tell you one of the things that really got me choked up, was the last time I was in San Antonio, Texas, and I visited the Alamo. And if you go inside the Alamo, do you know they have a New Hampshire flag?
Do they really?
They have a New Hampshire flag inside the Alamo, and it's because some of the defenders at the Alamo were from New Hampshire.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they believed in freedom, and they're willing to fight and die for it.
Wow.
So if wherever you are, and all those people, the Alamo, to people from Texas, that's like, holy ground, basically. But it just goes to show that it doesn't matter where you're from. If you're willing to fight for freedom, then you should be welcome.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hope that for the sake of my kids and your kids, that the future of politics does cool down, that people aren't so aggressive.
Yeah, we've been in a bad place in this country before. Think about like the 1970s and the Weather Underground and all the leftist bombings. Then I didn't
realize how many there were.
There was a lot. There was a lot, and they bombed the Capitol building. You want to talk about Capitol insurrection? There you go.
Yeah,
the people did that got a pardon too.
Yeah,
Bill Clinton. There you go. But this country fought a civil war.
Yeah,
so. We've always had these times in American history that have been really tense and they've been, really fraught. I think if we stay true to the principle, and this is why I like to call myself a conservative, is what am I trying to conserve? What I'm trying to conserve is the foundational idea of this country, that whole Declaration of Independence kind of ideas. That's what I'm trying to conserve. And I think if we stay true to those values, that's going to guide us and that's going to guide future generations.
How much of the country do you think is drifting away from that?
Some places a lot worse than others. And there is definitely kind of an urban-rural divide. I mean, there's places in rural California where, I mean, those poor people, they have been absolutely victimized and brutalized by their state government. So I can't say like, oh, all of California. And then you go to Ruby Red, Texas, and you can find people in Houston and Dallas and stuff like that, and they are Antifa and they are super woke and they are super toxic.
Maine's very much like that.
Maine's having issues. So my dad was actually born in Maine.
Okay.
So that's how I get a last name like this. It's a French Canadian last name. But so Maine is also used to be a lot more similar to New Hampshire, and it's really, really, really drifted away. So in terms of how many places are drifting in the wrong direction, I mean, I'd say easily half. I don't know the exact number, but it'd probably be about half, I'd say.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm an American. I mean, I have to be optimistic. That's our culture.
Not everybody is, though.
Not everybody is, but like I said, we've been in worse places as a country before. I honestly believe that.
What do you think is the biggest driver of what we're seeing go on right now?
The biggest driver, I think there's been a lot of people on the left who have been playing the long game, and they've been playing the long game for a very long time. I'm talking going back decades, and they have very deliberately infiltrated institutions. They've put their thumb on the scale. They look at everything not necessarily from, is this right, is this wrong, but does this further the goal of a social revolution in America, transforming America, into some kind of leftist, socialist, whatever kind of society that they want to build. And they've been doing that for a long time. And they've definitely subverted education to a large degree, especially higher education. So you get a lot of these bad ideas that are out there. A lot of them, I think, are coming from this, this long game, this subversion. They, what did the communists call it? The long march to the institutions. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in, letting people understand, hey, these values that we have in America. It's not that our country's never made a mistake. It's not that, there aren't bad things that have happened to good people. But the fact is the fundamental core of who we are as a country and as a society is fundamentally good. And it's something that should fundamentally prevail. And we need to have people be aware of that. We need young people to be aware of that. And I think you're starting to see that a little bit, especially with, some young men around college age. There's been a lot of pushback against some of this woke stuff, and America's always bad, and the founding fathers were always bad, and we need to tear down all the statues. There's people who are really starting to, investigate that and to use a leftist word, deconstruct that, and realize that, hey, no, there's actually a lot of really, really good value in our history, and we need to preserve it. We need to take the good stuff, and we need to learn from the bad stuff, and we need to move forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. It seems like there's a lot of demonization of America in the media.
Yeah, I mean, some media, yeah, for sure. Definitely with the mainstream media, there's always it's like a constant apology of, I'm so sorry for being American. I'm so sorry for my ancestors. I'm so sorry for this. I'm so sorry for that. So some people are like that, but other people, they're very happy to be American, and they should be. It's a very special thing, I think, to be an American.
I think the Charlie Kirk assassination might have hardened people on both sides, because you had the people that, like the guy that cheered in front of the camera.
Instantly,
like the guy.
He didn't even have time to process, and it was immediately like he was cheering.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? Like, he was bleeding out on stage at that very moment.
That's hate. You want to know what hatred looks like? That's hatred right there.
Yeah. And, I mean, Charlie Kirk was a husband and a father.
He was never, here's the other thing. He wasn't elected to any office.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, I guess politicians, it's within the realm of theoretical possibility. Okay, a politician gets assassinated. It's horrible. It's bad, but it's something that unfortunately our country has experienced several times. This was someone who was just a political commentator that, was particularly influential on the right. That was it. That was his crime. His crime was talking to people and expressing his center right wing point of view. And to them, that's worthy of a death sentence.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's tough to really understand how we got this far, because I don't remember that before. And when you have young people that are pretty much cheering it on, it's not a good sign for things to come. And there needs to be some way to tone it down.
You know, the negative stuff, our brains are kind of tuned to focus on the negative and on the disaster and on the loss.
But social media really helps to amplify that.
And it amplifies that, and that's what gets the attention. That's what gets the clicks.
Yeah.
You know, it just kind of reminds me, though, like when I was a kid, you know, you think about like Mr. Rogers and like something bad happens. What does Mr. Rogers say? Look for the helpers. Look for the people doing a good thing. And, you know, after Charlie Kirk's assassination, look at the way a lot of people on the right came together.
Yep.
And even some people who were on the left, who, you know, were self-identified as, you know, maybe Democrats, whatever, said, you know,
I don't want to be a part of this.
I don't want to be a part of this. These people don't speak for me. These don't represent me. And look how, you know, all these new Turning Point USA chapters that, you know, people are looking to found. So really, I mean,
churches started seeing more attendance than ever before.
More attendance and all this stuff. So look for the positive things. Look what people are doing to respond to catastrophe, not just the catastrophe itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where you're going to find a lot of the optimism and a lot of the hope.
You think it'll hold up?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
So how do you think the future looks with the midterms coming up?
I mean, midterms are always going to be a challenge when, you know, the top of the ticket. I mean, Trump's not going to be on the ballot.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who are 100% Trump, they really only care about Trump. They might not come out and vote. But I think a lot of people, you know, are also looking at things that are happening on the left, and they're going to think, you know, do I really want that? Do I really want to, you know, go forward with that? Like you look at, for instance, Mamdani winning in New York. You know, do we want to vote for socialism? I think a lot of people don't. I don't think, and do we want to vote for woke? I think a lot of people don't. So yeah, I'm not the world's best election predictor. Like I said, I ran for office 3 times without winning. Only won on the 4th time, so I'm probably not the best example. But I will tell you, every single time I ran, I got more votes.
Mm-hmm.
I got a higher percentage every single time I ran. And to me, it wasn't, you know, if there was a better candidate in my district that was going to step up and say, yeah, I want to run, then I would have been very happy to, you know, step aside or whatever. But in my district, there wasn't anybody else, you know, really stepping up. So I wanted to, I mean, you know, I wanted to continue to fight. I wanted to continue to build. And it's just that determination. You got to be determined. You can't just say, oh, well, I did it once and it didn't work out. Okay, I guess I'll quit and I'll just, you know, do whatever. Let society, you know, fall apart. If you really want it and you believe in it, the least you can do is, you know, go out there and vote and get involved. You think about past generations and what they were willing to do for freedom. I mean, you know, stories about there's this kid's book that's based on a true story, and it's about a family in East Germany that slowly over time they bought different odds and ends of fabric, and they were able to actually secretly sew a hot air balloon. And they were able to get their whole family out of communist East Germany by, at night, having their own little homemade hot air balloon so they could, you know, when the winds were right, they could drift over into West Germany, into a capitalist country, into freedom. People go to extreme lengths. I mean, you think about, you know, Valley Forge and, you know, people, you know, their feet are freezing. And you think about, you know, crossing the Atlantic Ocean, you know, let's say you're escaping the potato famine in Ireland or something like that. You think about, you know, or going west and, you know, you're on a wagon for months and months and months and you're in the desert and all this other stuff. The extreme hardship that our ancestors went through for freedom. And you think, okay, I can put my name on the ballot. I can let people talk bad about me on Facebook. I can, you know, get up and vote even though it snowed outside. You know, it's really a minor thing if you put it in perspective. But you got to do it, and you gotta get other conservatives to understand how important it is.
You think that people have kind of lost touch with reality because of all the struggles that past generations have gone through? Things are a lot easier for us today than they've ever been. Like you, if you're cold, you just turn a dial up on the wall. You want to go somewhere, you just get in your car and drive. You don't have to get your horse and your carriage. You know?
Yeah, the average person today lives better than the wealthiest kings, you know, 100 years ago.
That's true.
In a lot of ways, you know, maybe not every way, but in a lot of ways. You know, I see, you know, we're the granite state, but almost sometimes it's like we're the take it for granted state. And we shouldn't take any of it for granted. You know, this is not normal. being warm all winter at the touch of a button, flicking a light and instantly having light, having fresh food from all over the world, available year round.
Yeah.
Getting in your car and you can go hundreds of miles in an afternoon. You can hop on a plane, fly to another continent. None of this is normal in human history.
No.
All of this required
innovation.
It required humans. It required humans acting voluntarily, solving their own problems. None of this was created by government fiat either. It wasn't like the government said, oh yeah, now we're going to invent electricity. Now the 5-year plan is to build airplanes. No, it was all individuals thinking about ways that they could solve problems and, also do things which had value to other people. And they had a stable society that protected their rights to do these things and protected the wealth that they got from doing them, And it's not our state of nature. The state of nature is you are frozen and you are naked and you are alone in the woods. That's the default. The default is poverty and, hardship and, all of that.
It's a terrifying reality if we didn't have the technology that we do today.
Yeah.
There was somebody that said something to me not that long ago about they were complaining about capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about how we need to go back to a time when people cared about their neighbors like we don't now. And I said, well, what system are you talking about? What time are you talking about? She said hunters and gatherers.
Well, hunters-gatherers, often care about their tribe. Ask her about what they do to the other tribes.
And that's exactly what I said.
Care about our neighbors, not those ones though. Those ones you should be hunted to, to elimination.
Yeah, and capitalism has free markets has created this means of participation that doesn't require violence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a way for people to compete for resources that is not based on plunder.
Yeah, and I think that going to the election, the New York City election, the guy that won,
Mamdani,
his support there, I think they feel disenfranchised.
Absolutely.
And I think that this is something that Republicans could really touch on to try and start educating those disenfranchised people, especially once things really go south in New York, because they're going to.
Yeah, I mean, socialism, best case for New York is, Mamdani fails before he even gets started.
Yeah.
It'll be really bad for New York if he can actually get through some of his policy positions. That would be extremely bad. It's really fascinating. I saw a breakdown of Mamdani's support, and it was based on how long somebody had lived in New York City. And the lifers, people who were born and raised in New York City, overwhelmingly did not support him. The majority of his support was actually for people who had been in New York for less than 5 years.
Really?
For less than 5 years. And, look at his campaign promises. It's all about housing. It's all about, hey, we're going to freeze the rent and we're going to nationalize, we're going to take over the grocery stores and we're going to, free buses and free this. And it's that socialist rhetoric. And here's the thing. If you are not growing the pie, and New York has done an abysmal job of creating additional housing for decades and decades and decades. And some of that is because of all the zoning and land use controls. The other thing that's super toxic, and thankfully we defeated that in the New Hampshire House, is rent control. Rent control is another thing which does an exceptionally good job of absolutely destroying new housing creation and allowing additional space. So these people are moving in, they're paying these super inflated rents because the landlord has to make money somehow, right? So, okay, well, we'll soak the newcomer. And besides, there's not that much competition anyway. So yes, somebody who's been here for a long time, they have a rent controlled apartment. They're going to pay $900 a month in rent. And then somebody brand new, oh yeah, yours is $3,500 a month. Yours is $4,000 a month. That breeds a lot of resentment. And what created the problem? All the problems were created by government. So if we actually had an opportunity for the free market and people to voluntarily come in and solve some of people's needs and some of people's problems, we wouldn't have necessarily this situation. It could be like Austin, Texas, where, the average rent, I think, is $1,400 a month, for a new apartment. That could be New York. but they haven't chosen that. They haven't chosen that future. And now it's every single government intervention creates these externalities. It creates these knock-on effects. And then over time, they propose new government interventions to deal with the consequences of the previous government interventions. And it keeps escalating until you get to the point where they're like, oh, let's just nationalize the whole thing. Let's just, or not nationalize, but let's just take over the whole thing. In the case of New York, let's have it all run by the government. And then everything, I think New Yorkers probably could look at public housing and the public housing projects in New York, and they should come to the conclusion that, maybe this isn't such a great idea, because it's not like the government does a really great job of providing housing, maintaining housing, building housing. If you look at every single communist country, it's always housing shortages. I mean, the Soviet Union struggled with it. Every communist country struggles with it. And then they build these, really ugly, prefabricated concrete, block apartments, and then they don't maintain them, and then they're falling apart and all this other stuff. There's no need to live like that. People could, we could just use the free market to provide housing the same way we use the free market to provide food, the same way we use free market to provide transportation, the same way we use it to satisfy all of our other human needs.
People are voting for it, though.
They're voting for it because it's a very, very seductive, simple idea.
Yeah.
And that also you add a little bit of, if you buy into the class warfare stuff, you say, oh, well, the reason my house is so expensive, or I don't have one, or isn't that nice is, oh, it's that greedy capitalist. It's greed. It's, oh, look at the, tax the rich, whatever. We could confiscate every single dollar from every single billionaire in America. Do you know how long we could fund the federal government for?
It's like 3 months, right?
Yeah, it's a little more than that. So maybe it's less now. When I saw it, it was 8 months.
8 months.
So, and never mind, if you confiscate all that wealth, who's going to buy it? You've gotten rid of all the billionaires. But if you could confiscate all of Elon Musk's wealth and Jeff Bezos and all that other stuff, it's not enough.
No.
It's not enough. And it's never, ever going to be enough, because there's an infinite amount of wants and needs and only a limited amount of resources to satisfy those wants and needs. So how do you prioritize?
Right.
Well, you could do voluntary exchange, or you could have a top-down centralized government model that will fail. And then if you want anything, you have to either be loyal to the regime, or you have to beg and plead, and hopefully the government will throw you some scraps.
Oh, look what the government did with the EBTs.
Yeah.
Just for the last, 43 days.
I mean, the number of people on those, by the way, has exploded.
Yeah.
If you look at like how many people are enrolled.
It's over 40 million now. It was up to 40 million, I think, when Obama was in office.
And this is one of the really disingenuous things about politics is if you have a program like that, then anytime, you want to reform it or change it or anything like that, you can't touch it, because now you're going to have 40 million people who are pissed off that you are messing with their EBT.
But that's the point of it.
Or, however many people, they're mad. You're going to be messing with their Social Security, or you're going to be messing with their Obamacare, or you're going to be messing with, every single one of these things. As soon as you create it, has a baked-in constituency. I mean, look at rent control. Try to get rid of rent control. Every single person in a rent control department is not going to vote for you.
Yeah.
So this really is, it really is kind of it's a self-reinforcing feedback loop if you let it get too far, if you let it get too bad. So one of the things is, take a principled stand from the very beginning and say, we're going to solve our problems, with freedom instead of government control. And that's what I'm trying to do with housing in New Hampshire. And that's honestly what I'm trying to do with all these other problems we're dealing with in New Hampshire.
Could you name some of the other ones?
So one of the things we really, I think, have an issue with is education. Okay. Education funding. It's about 2/3 of your property tax burden, which is your biggest tax burden in New Hampshire, is related to education. And it seems like every year more money goes into it. Every year the results either stay the same or get worse. And it's an unsustainable system. And then you couple that with, as I mentioned earlier, the lowest number of births in New Hampshire's modern history. But then there's a lot of fixed costs to buildings and maintenance and all this other stuff. So your cost per pupil is going to explode. We're already at over, $20,000 per pupil. I mean, you're going to start looking at what, $30,000. I mean, it's crazy to educate one kid.
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be an alternative to that. And I think in the legislature, we've made some strides. I am a big fan of the EFA program because I see it as a way to, one, it's a better deal for the taxpayer because the cost per student is much less. But the other thing too is you're actually bringing in now choice. You're bringing in competition. You're letting people voluntarily come to solutions instead of a top-down centralized, even if it's at the district level, a top-down centralized solution. So I think that's probably a really big challenge. Would be another one, would be education.
Also, enrollment's gone down with the
enrollments have gone down as well.
I know that I've been to some planning board meetings, and I've heard people that are very anti-growth. One of the biggest things that they worry about is new families coming in because the schools will have to teach those kids. It's going to cost more money.
Well, I mean, the thing is have any of these communities that have fewer kids, have any of these communities seen their education costs go down?
Exactly.
I haven't seen it. But, the other thing too is, to say this is a community that we don't want any kids. Think about what that says and does culturally.
Yeah.
I think we should have kids in our communities. I think we should have families in our communities. And that's really one of the cynical things about government is that when you reach for these government solutions, there is no making the pie bigger. There is no growing your way out of the problem. Instead, what you have is, you have to pick winners and losers. In order for someone to benefit, someone else has to lose. And that creates an us versus them. And then it becomes very easy to play people off against one another, So it's very, very cynical. And
it's dirty.
It's dirty. And I don't like it. I would rather communities be welcoming and good places for families. And I would also like to see our education spending go down and our property taxes go down. Now, does that mean I want to see education results and quality go down? Absolutely not. I want to see that go up.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do that. You look at something, for instance, look at, for instance, like spaceflight. You had the government through NASA running America's space program, and what did it cost to go up to orbit? It was exorbitant. It was super, super high. Launches were very infrequent. It was very bureaucratic. And then you had, finally at some point, we started to have market competition. We started to have SpaceX and, Blue Origin and, all these other companies. And you saw the cost to launch radically decrease. You saw the launch schedules radically increase. So you had cost went way down, quality went way up because you had a market-based solution.
Yeah.
We could do this with education. It just requires the political will to do it. But there is a huge, I think, entrenched constituency where some people are benefiting from this level of government spending and government control, and they don't want to lose the power. They don't want to lose the jobs. They don't want to lose the control. And they're okay if we don't have good education outcomes. They're okay if we have, double-digit increases in school spending every year. That's okay for them because, it benefits them in a narrow way.
People need to realize that kids are the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Without children, there is no future.
But there have been people that have said that, we already raised our kids in Massachusetts, so we don't care about it up here in New Hampshire.
You want to talk about massing up New Hampshire? That's a mass up New Hampshire attitude right there.
Absolutely.
We already did it in Massachusetts. We don't have to do it here yeah.
What are some of the things that you're working on in this coming year?
So I have a couple of bills filed, most of them relatively minor things. I think my most ambitious bill is it's going to be a bill to protect home-based businesses. So
what does this do?
So what this bill is going to do is it's going to say if you have a home-based business and it's not causing any traffic problems, any kind of externalities or whatever, that you're allowed to have your home-based business as of right, statewide. There's no town that can take that away from you.
Can they do that now?
Some towns can.
Really?
So yeah, depending, for instance, you say, this is a podcasting business. Oh, well, is this zoned for a recording studio? Yeah. Well, hopefully your planning board doesn't listen to this broadcast. Or your zoning board, I should say.
I'll have to cut that part out.
Yeah, I'll have to edit this one out. But that's the thing. So there's been a lot of really big companies. Think Hewlett Packard, think Apple Computer. They were founded in garages.
Yeah.
So, if maybe the next $1 trillion company could happen right here in New Hampshire and it could happen in somebody's garage, but it won't happen if they're never, ever allowed to get off the ground because, zoning says you're not allowed to have a business in your garage. You can't have a computer business in your garage. You can't do that. So if you're not bothering anybody, then you should be able to run a business, from your home. And I think that's a good way to help small businesses, entrepreneurs starting out. One of your biggest expenses is going to be overhead. if you already have a garage, or you want to sell fresh eggs from your front yard or whatever, whatever it is you want to do, you want to have maybe people come over and, let's say you're making stuff to sell online, like to Etsy or something like that. I think that's all stuff that you should be allowed to do, and it should be protected. And it goes a little bit further in that if you do have a business, like let's say you're an accountant or an attorney, maybe every now and then you have to meet a client. It does have like a baseline to where if it's less than, however many clients a day and you're not having massive truck deliveries all the time, it provides a framework for those businesses are protected, but the town is allowed to regulate it to a degree to where you're not running a Amazon warehouse out of your garage or whatever.
Yeah.
So it does try to strike a balance, and I'd be more than happy. I'm especially looking forward to committee testimony if there's anywhere where some of that stuff needs to be tweaked, one way or another. Be more than happy to do that. But the fundamental idea is let's protect home-based businesses in New Hampshire. Let's make New Hampshire the state where if you're going to start a business at home, you can.
That's good. What else you got?
What else I got? Let's see. So I have another bill related to just the noticing for when your town has a special town meeting. Like let's say you need to issue a bond or something. Currently, the only way that gets noticed, not just noticed, but the actual warrant gets posted is in the newspaper. That law was passed in 1945. I'm imitating that to where if the town wants to put the contents of the warrant on the town website, they can do that too. That's okay. So there's an update on that one. Let me see. There's another one to where it makes a tweak to the closed portion of public meetings when you do under RSA 91A, to where the portions that are held from the minutes are only related to that specific motion. So just making sure that only the bare minimum is withheld from the public, only the parts that absolutely need to be, because there should be transparency in public meetings. So those are some of the other bills that I filed.
Are there any ones coming up in New Hampshire that you're excited about?
I'm excited. It's going to be really good. So we don't yet have the bill text for all of the LSRs that have been filed. And for those that don't know, LSRs are legislative service requests. It's where a legislator says, I want their bill to be written about this. Language is proposed by the Office of Legislative Services. There's a period of time to go back and forth to refine the language. And then finally, the proposed bill text is published. So maybe by the time that this airs, hopefully that'll be available. But there should be actually, because it's an election year, we're probably looking at over 1,000 bills. And some of those are going to be very, very, very impactful, particularly regarding education. There's also in the Housing Committee, a lot of the people who do not like some of the housing bills we passed, they've filed bills to basically repeal and undo every single one.
Oh.
So we're going to be dealing with those in committee as well.
You think they got a shot at repealing any of them?
Considering that they were passed out of the Housing Committee, approved by both chambers, and signed by the governor, I'm not optimistic that.
Why would they waste the time? Just to grandstand?
Well, I think some people are very upset about this. So it's about, hey, sending the message. Maybe they thought that maybe the first time around there wasn't enough scrutiny on some of this stuff. But again, I don't see the governor signing a bill to undo something that she just signed. Yeah. So I think it's more about sending the message.
Yeah.
The thing is, they filed these bills. So maybe they could be amended in interesting ways to, improve housing in New Hampshire. Maybe it's an opportunity to do that. So we'll see exactly what happens.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely been an exciting couple of years in New Hampshire since the last election, I would say. It's been a lot of fun doing this podcast and getting to know a lot of state reps.
Yeah, I've been listening to this podcast, in the morning, when I drive and stuff like that. So I really have been enjoying it. And I think it's a really good forum to kind of do these deep dives on New Hampshire politics. And New Hampshire, I think, is also uniquely a very political state because we have the first in the nation primary, because we have a legislature, with 400 reps, and most of those people, I mean, they're citizen legislators. I mean, nobody's getting rich off of this. Nobody's doing this as a career. Well, I say almost nobody's getting rich. Nobody that I know is getting rich, although I hear rumors about maybe some people on the left are getting paid to be organizers or directors of nonprofits, and actually, really their only job is to show up and be a legislator. But
Really?
I don't have any personal knowledge about any of that stuff. That's all secondhand stuff that I hear.
How much did you spend on your campaign?
Oh, I don't know, maybe like $1,500.
That's not bad.
No. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's in any other state, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars at a minimum if you're going to make a run for any kind of state legislative office. New Hampshire really, really is more of a citizen legislature than a lot of other places. And then you add to it, their town meeting form of government. A lot of the positions in our local communities require people in the community to volunteer for these positions. Select board, planning board, zoning board. These are all volunteer positions. So it really is, you want to talk about a government by the people, for the people. New Hampshire, I think, is doing it in a way really maybe more so than anywhere else I can think of. And that causes people in New Hampshire, most people, I think, to have at least some interest in politics, whether on the right or the left.
There's a lot of people that have interest in New Hampshire's politics because I know that some of the legislators down in Bedford are spending tens of thousands of dollars on seats.
Yeah. I mean, there are some seats that get really expensive. Special elections can be very, very, very expensive.
I heard the Berlin one was very expensive.
And it's about driving turnout. I mean, there's a lot of great conservatives that don't vote in special elections. They don't vote in their town elections. A lot of these, you get a double-digit increase in your taxes, and it was a single-digit percentage of registered voters that even showed up to vote on the warrant articles. This is what I'm talking about. If you think that showing up to vote for president every 4 years is enough, it's not. I'm sorry, but it's not. You got to be involved. You got to be paying attention.
Why is this such a problem on the conservative side?
I think part of it is a lot of conservatives, they have families, they have jobs, they have businesses. So a lot of times people are busy. And there's also this thing where, oh yeah, we voted for you to take care of all of that. And it's like, okay, there's some things we can do, but we can't do everything because, a lot of this is, the will of the voters, and you got to show up and vote. You know what I mean?
Part of the reason I started doing this was to give people an idea of, to kind of get in touch with their legislator in a long form.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And because a lot of people work in industries like construction, service industries, they probably don't pay attention to politics. A lot of people don't even know that they have a state representative. Yeah.
Well, so what's one of my favorite things is actually solving people's problems, like real people's problems. So there's another bill I have filed where if you are a nano distiller, you can sell a very, very small amount of your liquor products directly to an on-premises licensee. So basically a restaurant. So some of these distillers, they distill less than, 10,000 cases of alcohol a year. Very, very, very small. It might not really be worth, maybe they want to come up with some kind of new special, spirit, and, it's just a really, really small production run, and you want to provide that to a restaurant. Well, currently in the current statute, you can't do that, but you could sell it at a farmer's market. I think it's kind of silly to where a liquor store or a liquor manufacturer, a distiller, could sell directly at a farmer's market, but they couldn't sell to a restaurant.
Yeah.
And I mean, keep in mind also, this is with all the taxes being paid. It's not like the state's missing out or the feds are missing out on their tax revenue. There's mechanisms for them to get that. So that was actually a problem. I heard about a small distiller in the North Country. They were dealing with this issue. And I was like, let me see if we can file a bill to see if we can fix this problem. So hopefully it'll be able to get through the legislature and solve that issue for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things is actually helping people, let's get rid of some of the rules and the red tape and make it to where people can do stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's what's exciting.
So you're happy you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I am happy what I'm doing because I think it actually makes a real difference. And I can tell you that when there's something that passes by one vote and it goes the way you wanted, it makes me really, really happy I showed up that day.
Yeah.
That's a really good feeling.
What do your wife and kids think about the whole thing?
I mean, my kids, they know that, hey, dad's busy sometimes. I work from home, so I am fortunate in that I probably do get to spend more than a normal amount of time with my kids. So it is, I'm not going to say it's not a burden on the family. I think it is, but thankfully my wife is very supportive. I'm so fortunate and I'm so happy to have her. And if she's listening to this in the car when we're driving, I love you. But I really couldn't do it without her help. So she's been really tremendous in making sure that I can do this stuff. But she, it's funny because she's interested in politics too. Our second date, actually, because we met in DC, our second date was actually at the Cato Institute.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she's kind of a political junkie too. So she really she understands that this stuff's important because she wants to see a better New Hampshire for our kids.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to go over before we wrap this up?
Not really. Live free or die. Other than that,
do you have any socials you want to announce?
So I am on X. If you are on X, you can follow me. It's Can't Be Silent Cal.
Okay.
So follow me there. I am on Facebook, but I never check it. I don't really like Facebook. COVID really soured me on Facebook, but I still have an account, to keep up with relatives and stuff like that.
And you have a website as well?
Yes, I do. So you can go to electcalvin.com. That is my website. I do need to update that for campaign season. And there is actually a link on there. If you really like what I had to say and you want to help me campaign and run for re-election, there is a link there to donate as well.
Awesome. Calvin, thanks for coming all the way out here and sitting down and talking with me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.